Hello, this is Craig Brelsford with Red Chip Companies. Thank you for joining today's event with ASP Isotopes, which trades on the Nasdaq under the ticker ASPI. With us today, we have Paul Mann, CEO of ASP Isotopes. We will begin with a brief presentation in a moment, and then we will answer your questions. You may submit a question at any time by writing us at by clicking the button at the bottom of your Zoom window and typing in your question. Before we begin, please allow me to read the Safe Harbor Statement. This call may contain forward-looking statements within the meaning of the Private Securities Litigation Reform Act of 1995. All statements pertaining to future financial and/or operating results, along with other statements about the future expectations, beliefs, goals, plans, or prospects expressed by management, constitute forward-looking statements. Any statements that are not historical facts should also be considered forward-looking statements. Of course, forward-looking statements involve risks and uncertainties. I now turn the webinar over to Paul. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Craig, and thanks everyone for your interest in our company. So as Craig said, we'll try and go through a quick 20-minute presentation, and then we'll open up for plenty of Q&A afterwards. So we've got your normal company presentation first for those that are new to the stock, and then questions. So hopefully you can see the slides. So just forward-looking statements, please read this, and also please review our 10K, 10Qs, and other SEC filings for our disclosures and what have you. So ASP Isotopes is a company we incorporated about sort of 3.5, 4 years ago, and our goal was to focus on producing isotopes the world needs to enable a lot of future technologies as well as technologies that already exist today. And the three main areas we focus on are medical, semiconductors, and nuclear energy, and we'll talk about those three end markets in more detail as the call goes on. But all are potentially large opportunities, and we have plants built in two of those industries already. As you'll see on the right-hand side of the screen, we have kind of three verticals in the company. ASP Isotopes in the middle is the hub of the company that produces stable isotopes, and that's where we built our three plants in South Africa. And to the left, you see PET Labs. That's actually South Africa's and Africa's leading supplier of PET radioisotopes for nuclear imaging and nuclear medicine. And that business generates a 70% gross margin. And our thinking is if we can generate a 70% gross margin in a country with just $6,000 per capita GDP, we can make a lot of money elsewhere in the world. So the plan is to grow that around the world over the next several years. And there's a real symbiotic relationship between PET Labs and ASP Isotopes. ASP Isotopes produces stable isotopes, while PET Labs buys them and turns them into radioisotopes. And to the right, you see Quantum Leap Energy, and that is that's a business we're going to spin out at some point in the future. We aim to spin out at some point in the future. That's going to focus on the nuclear fuels the world will need in the future. So specifically higher low enriched uranium and lithium-6 and lithium-7. And that's the business that has signed MOUs with TerraPower and another large US-based SMR company for HALEU production. And collectively, those customers need about $37 billion of HALEU between now and 2037, and there aren't many potential suppliers of that in the world. This next slide just shows some of our market milestones and operational milestones. And the goal this year is pretty straightforward. We need to get our first three plants up to doing commercial production, get the company generating revenues and free cash flow. And that's really kind of priority 1, 2, and 3. And then beyond that, the goal is to build additional plants for lasers in South Africa, start building an ASP plant in Iceland, and then also start or certainly accelerate the production of higher low enriched uranium at Pelindaba in a joint venture with Nexa. So what are isotopes, people often ask? Well, when you think about different elements, hydrogen, carbon, and oxygen, they're easily distinguishable. There are different number of protons in the nucleus, different places on the periodic table, different physical and chemical properties. Carbon's a solid, the other two are oxygen. They're clearly very different. But same elements have different isotopes, and that's why they have different number of neutrons inside the nucleus. That gives them different physical properties that certain industries need to exploit. So, for example, carbon-14 has 3 isotopes. One has a mass of 12, another has a mass of 13, and one has a mass of 14. And we have customers that require the carbon-14 isotope in high levels of enrichment. So our goal is to take naturally occurring carbon and enrich it in the carbon-14 isotope. When you think about a bag of carbon, a bag of charcoal, that's probably $1 a kilo. Kilo of carbon-14, about $24 million a kilo. you think about silicon, which is sand on a beach, that has 3 isotopes. One has mass of 28, another mass of 29, another has mass of 30. You know, a bag of sand is perhaps $1 a kilo as well. When we enrich it in the 28 isotope, that's about $500,000 a kilo. Silicon 28 has applications in advanced semiconductors, quantum computing, and artificial intelligence. So we take these really natural, really basic elements, and we convert them into very, very special chemicals or very special materials that have got specific properties that customers want to exploit. Now, I got interested in this industry really because of my background as an investor in healthcare and chemicals companies, and it was pretty common for companies that required isotopes to miss quarters because they couldn't get hold of them. Go and look back at the earnings transcripts of Mallinckrodt over the last 10, 20 years. There are all kinds of problems with them securing isotopes. And this kind of chart here kind of explains why the supply demand has been so problematic over the last sort of 20 years, and very much more problematic in the last 3 or 4 years. So we have 2 ways of enriching isotopes, 2 technologies. The first is the ASP process. The second is the quantum enrichment process. So ASP is a great process for anything that converts into a gas. We take a gas and we spin the gas inside a vertical tube, and we use basically gravitational forces or fields to separate the heavy from the light isotopes. We push the gas around certain corners and through certain valves, and that allows us to enrich in a particular isotope. You know, a traditional centrifuge that Russia may use for enriching uranium is also a vertical tube. The tube spins around very quickly and creates a vortex inside. And centrifuges cost billions of dollars to build. They're massive pieces of infrastructure, often have a power station next to them. They can only enrich heavy isotopes. They can't enrich light isotopes like carbon-14 and silicon-28 in the form of methane and silane. And our process is much cheaper capital to build. On the downside, our process uses a little more energy than a traditional centrifuge. But, you know, by going to countries like Iceland, we think we could become the lowest cost producer made of isotopes in any way. Quantum enrichment is great for something that doesn't turn into a gas. So we take a metal solid, we vaporize it, put it through a laser plant, laser beam. Laser beams very heavily very specialized or very finely tuned and fixed on a particular isotope, and then we can knock an electron off a particular isotope. That gives that isotope a positive charge. We can collect that positively charged isotope on a collector plate. We've built 2 ASP plants in South Africa and 1 quantum enrichment plant in South Africa. And this page here shows a picture of an ASP plant. You'll see on the left, you'll see the separators. In the middle and the right, you'll see the heavy and light element recoveries. And this is our carbon-14 plant. So this just summarizes what I just said a moment ago. So let's talk about nuclear and nuclear medicine. And so this is a very large opportunity already today. You know, it's growing very rapidly as we find new uses for isotopes in nuclear medicine. And this chart here kind of shows some of the isotopes we expect to go after over the next several years. And you'll also see a real symbiotic relationship between ASP isotopes and PET labs. So on the left, you see the stable isotopes that we expect ASPI to produce. And in the middle there, you see the radioisotopes that PET labs expects to convert a stable isotope into. And if you take a stable isotope, you hit it with a proton, a neutron, or an electron, you can convert it into one of these radioisotopes that we use in medicine. So first big opportunity we're looking for is ytterbium-176. And ytterbium-176 is kind of the feedstock to produce a new emerging cancer drug, which is called a beta-emitting radiopharmaceutical. Pluvicto, made by Novartis, is the first of these to really hit the market and become a blockbuster. Consensus forecasts for Pluvicto are kind of in the sort of the $4 billion range as we get into next decade. And consensus forecast for this category, there's lots in development, approach 15 billion kind of next decade. And ytterbium-176 is the best way to make lutetium-177. Our ytterbium-176 plant is currently in the commissioning phase. We completed the construction in September last year, and we expect to start commercial production very soon. And we think that plant will do about 1 kilogram of capacity or production per year. We think we've identified about 2 kilograms of demand. at about $20,000 a gram. So we'd expect to start supplying customers, very soon. There's a lot of appetite and excitement about receiving this isotope. There's been a huge shortage of this isotope over the last several years. If you look at the Novartis clinical trial, 5% of patients died because they couldn't actually make the drug because of a shortage of the raw material. So we hope to really solve that supply problem with this product. The second isotope we're looking at producing is zinc-68. So before you have a lutetium or actinium-based drug, and there's a lot of these drugs in development are coming to market soon, you need to have a PET scan of a gallium-68 marker. We think the best way to make a gallium-68 isotope is from zinc-68. You hit it with a proton in a cyclotron, and you convert it to gallium-68. And there's a lot of interest, a lot of demand for zinc-68, and we'd expect to start producing that at some point in the next sort of 18 months or so. And then molybdenum-100 is, I think, one of the biggest opportunities we have, but it's probably also one of the harder opportunities to commercialize. Technetium-99 is the workhorse of nuclear medicine. It's about a sort of over $4 billion market today. And technetium-99 is made from molybdenum-99. Now, molybdenum-99 has a 66-hour half-life. As you ship it around the world, it's losing half its value every 2.5 days. It's been really problematic from a supply chain standpoint. And actually, we think it's better to make technetium-99 from molybdenum-100, which is a stable isotope. You can keep it on the shelf, and you can just convert it to technetium-99 at the point of care. We think this is very, very interesting. We have a lot of interest in this from Asia, and we'd look to start supplying this market as soon as we think they're ready to start taking supply of it. So this is another isotope we should expect to supply this year, carbon-14. So we built a carbon-14 plant in South Africa. We expect that to have capacity of about 400 grams a year, or $10 million a year. That's about the global demand. It's a very niche isotope that's used in the development of new pharmaceuticals and agrochemicals. We've signed a multi-year supply agreement with a Canadian customer for a minimum take or pay of $2.5 million a year. They've indicated they want a bit more in their first couple of years. We'll see how much they actually want, but we can supply that from our plant in Canada. Our plant in South Africa. We'd expect that to start up again in the next sort of several weeks or so, and supply product during the first half of this year. So this chart just summarizes what I just said a moment ago, and also highlights some of the opportunities we have in nuclear medicine for new plants we expect to start building this year. So semiconductors is another interesting and exciting area for us. And so as I said earlier, silicon-28 has silicon-28, 29, and 2030. They're the three isotopes of silicon. And silicon-29 isotope has a half negative spin around the nucleus. It means it doesn't conduct electricity. If we can remove that 29 isotope and just have pure silicon-28, the conductivity increases thousands of fold, and the heat transfer capabilities increases multiple folds of as well. And so there's a lot of interest in silicon-28 for quantum computing, advanced semiconductors, AI, to make chips that are faster, don't heat up as much. And so we've signed a contract with a US-based semiconductor company and a global industrial gas company to supply them with silicon-28 later this year. Our silicon-28 plant finished construction on that in November of last year. We're currently going through the commissioning phase. That plant should start up this quarter as well. And we're really looking forward to getting product to customers and starting to supply this market. Our process is quite unique in that we can enrich silicon-28 as silane. The Russians also enrich silicon-28. They enrich the silicon tetrafluoride. And silicon tetrafluoride can't really be used in a fab, but silane can be. So there's a lot of interest in customers for this product. So this chart here just shows other isotopes we expect to produce in the quantum computing and semiconductor markets. And we expect to produce germanium-70, this year as well. Germanium-73 has the same properties as silicon-29. It doesn't conduct electricity. If you can remove that germanium-73 isotope, you increase the conductivity multiples of as well. So ASP plants use quite a lot of energy. And so our plan is to start building plants later this year in Iceland. Iceland benefits from very cheap, very green, renewable energy. We've signed a lease for a building in Iceland, as well as a long-term energy supply agreement. And we're going through the licensing discussions with the government right now. We'd expect to start building that plant fairly soon. So nuclear energy is another area that I think most investors are very interested in right now. There's a real renaissance of nuclear energy. I think we all know the problems in the world, that the world needs to double the amount of energy, of electricity over the next 25 years, whilst trying to achieve net zero targets. They're not going to achieve that. I'm a realist as well as an optimist. That's not going to happen, I'm afraid. And during COP28 a couple of years ago, many countries agreed to triple the amount of nuclear energy by 2050 as well. Again, I'm an optimist and a realist. That's not going to happen either, I'm afraid, but hopefully they'll go some way towards achieving that. And the future of nuclear energy, in our view, is the small modular reactor, the SMR. You think of what made a car really cheap, it was the Ford Model T in production line manufacturing. This takes production line economics to nuclear energy. Historically, a nuclear power plant would be 10-20 billion dollars, take 10-20 years to build. You place it in the middle of nowhere. You have a huge transmission grid to get that energy into populations of people. These are much smaller plants that can be placed nearer the populations. The exclusion zone around the TerraPower Natrium is just 400 meters. That compares to about 6 miles to Koeberg, which is the power plant in South Africa. These plants are much smaller, cheaper to build, faster to build, less transmission required. We think it's the future of nuclear energy. Some of the companies involved in this industry, TerraPower, that's Bill Gates's company. Oklo, that's Sam Altman's company. X Energy, that's Cam Garfassian and Rolls-Royce, and they're all quite advanced in building these new nuclear reactors. One of the problems with these new reactors is that they all require a new form of uranium called HALEU, high assay low enriched uranium, and that's enriched to 19.75%. Traditional uranium was enriched up to 5%. And so this is a step change in terms of the energy density you get in that fuel. One of the problems is that there's no Western producer of HALEU today in commercial quantities. When these plans were put together 10 years ago, the assumption was Russia would supply the HALEU. That would have largely come from downgraded weapons grade uranium. And that's no longer available. And so these companies are desperately looking for new suppliers of HALEU. And we've supplied 2 MOUs with large US-based SMR companies. One of them we've named as TerraPower to build a facility for them to produce HALEU here in South Africa. We think quantum enrichment is the best way to produce HALEU. I've kind of described already how that works. This table here kind of shows why we think it's the best. And so the selectivity on that fourth line is the important line to look at. So if you look at for gaseous diffusion back in the 1940s, 1.003. This was hugely energy intensive, very capital intensive, but at the time it was all they could do to make the uranium they needed back in the 1940s. In the 1970s and 80s, centrifuges came around, and they've got an alpha of 1.15, significantly better than those attached to gaseous diffusion. And the world has used those for the last sort of several decades. To the right, you see some laser-based approaches to AVLIS, which was pioneered at Lawrence Livermore in the United States. That had about 14 per the charts. We think they did a bit better than that, so we're giving them 10 to 50. And then SILEX, or separation of isotopes by laser excitation, in the press or in publications, that's quoted as 2 to 20. Quantum enrichment, our approach, has a selectivity of greater than 50. So it's a step change versus other enrichment methods. And this chart here just kind of shows why we think it's better. So it's a very complex spectroscopy. We're able to access quantum forbidden transitions between various quantum states. We have very advanced laser beam profiling and shaping that allows us to combine these beams to travel through the material, separated by nanoseconds in terms of where they hit the atom. And I say we're able to, we've done this in a number of different elements. This chart here kind of shows the published data on quantum enrichment. So if you look at the chart on the right, the feedstock is the top chart. This is lithium-6 and lithium-7. This is actually published in the PhD of our Chief Technology Officer, Hendrik Strijdom. And so lithium-6 is at 7%, lithium-7 is at 93%. And after a single pass through our enrichment chamber, you'll see lithium-6 is over 90% and lithium-7 is below 10%. So that's an enrichment factor of 112. So when we say greater than 50, we mean substantially greater than 50. We have achieved enrichment factors of up to 678 using quantum enrichment. And our scientists have enriched a number of different metals, including uranium, lithium, ytterbium, zirconium, and zinc using quantum enrichment. So this chart here kind of shows you some of the problems in the nuclear fuel supply chain right now. But the prices for the ore, the conversion, and the enrichment are all trading at 10, 20-year highs. It's very rare to see a commodity increase in price by 7-fold and see no supply side response. That kind of shows you how challenging it is to add new capacity in this industry, particularly at current prevailing prices. So what does this mean for HALEU? Well, if one could produce HALEU today, it's likely going to be priced in excess of $20,000 a kilo. When these reactors, when the SMR plans were put together, people were expecting less than $7,000 a kilo. That will likely make the economics for a lot of the really small SMRs quite challenging. Larger SMRs, I think, are less susceptible to the price of the fuel, but certainly the smaller ones are. And one of the things we think excites us about quantum enrichment is because the enrichment factor is so high, we think we can take depleted tails, so depleted nuclear waste from other enrichers, and we can convert that into HALEU. That would really lower the price of HALEU dramatically. And that's one of the reasons why we think this is like a pretty interesting, pretty exciting technology. This chart here shows some of the other isotopes we expect to produce in the nuclear fuel supply chain over the next several years and how we expect to do it. And so I guess finally, just to summarize before Q&A, we have a proven and proprietary technology that's been developed over 20 years in South Africa. We've built 3 manufacturing facilities in South Africa. All 3 are starting up right now. And we have multiple secular and geopolitical tailwinds helping the growth of this industry. So I'll stop there now, Craig, and we'll take any questions that the audience may have.
Thank you, Paul. To speak to Paul, click the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom window. You may also click the Q&A button and type in your question, as many have already done. I will read your question aloud in that case, and Paul will answer. Paul, why do you think TerraPower decided to partner with ASPI? Did they visit South Africa?
So first question, TerraPower and why in South Africa? So, we feel we have a pretty unique technology. I think they may agree with that. They came to South Africa many times. They actually brought some scientists from Lawrence Livermore who worked on the Avrilus program to South Africa with them on one occasion. The founder and chairman of TerraPower is Bill Gates, and one of his goals is to get energy for emerging markets. He talks about nuclear energy trading at a green discount to hydrocarbon-based energy. And I think, one of his views is that we're not going to solve the climate crisis by providing more green energy to the United States. We have to get green energy into emerging markets. That's where the growth of populations are. That's where the growth in emissions are. And emerging market populations are very poor. They don't have the money to pay for new expensive energy. They don't get enough food. It doesn't mean they don't get dessert after dinner. That means they're dying of preventable diseases. And so we cannot expect them to pay to solve the Western world's problem with climate crisis. And if you talk to emerging markets people about, their climate anxiety, they don't have any climate anxiety. They're trying to survive day to day. And so, we think we have a technology that is able to reprice nuclear energy and at a green discount to hydrocarbon-based energy. And I think that's something that is really exciting. And that must be, I think, one of the reasons why they wanted to partner with us. Secondly, we have a joint venture with NECSA, South African Energy Nuclear Corporation, who have a facility in South Africa called Pelindaba. Is essentially a plug-and-play location where we can go to potentially enrich uranium. They have a lot of the permits and licenses in place already. It's well known by the IAEA. From a proliferation risk standpoint, all the securities in place already. It used to enrich uranium back in the day. That would potentially save 10 years of us doing anything in the United States. And so again, people need HALEU right now, not in 20 years' time. And we think that's big advantage that we have. So there are two kind of reasons. I guess also as a company, I think we're a very good Samaritan. You know, in South Africa, we give away all of our drugs to children under the age of 18 free of charge. And when a child has cancer, we kind of think the parents are under enough stress already about trying to find out how they pay for that drug. And that's brought us a lot of goodwill, the South African government, as well as, I think, you know, recognition from international organizations like Terra Power. So I think they're some of the reasons, Craig. But yeah, that's maybe it.
Thank you very much to our writer for that question. Paul, can you provide an update on the commissioning of the Silicon 28 plant? Why did you decide to increase the capacity to 50 kilograms rather than the original 10 kilograms?
So the commissioning is going really well, actually. Yeah, commissioning is one of those things where you find all the problems, and you never know how long it's going to take. It depends on how many problems you find. But actually, the team haven't found that many problems so far in the commissioning stage. You know, the two small problems we found were quickly solved. So, for example, we use liquid, very, very cold liquid helium to freeze the silane out of the gas mixture in a cryogenic distillation column. And that's powered by what's called a Stirling engine. We found the insulation on the Stirling engine wasn't sufficient. We were losing some temperature there. You know, the OEM supplier of the Stirling engine came out, fixed it, mended it. It kind of seems to be working now. You know, one of the compressors, a really big compressor we have in the heavy element recovery, the impeller broke, it snapped. And again, we've got a new impeller, put it in, started working again, you know. So, I mean, when it comes to finding problems, you know, there haven't really been that many now. We've got multiple stages in Cascade. It's looking really good. And I think one of the really encouraging things we're seeing is that we're actually cleaning up the gas. So silane is already very pure that goes in. It's 6N pure, so it's 99.9999% chemically pure. And that means it has trace impurities like disilane, methylsilane, and chlorosilane contained in it, which semiconductor companies really don't want. And we always thought that we would actually remove and clean up some of those trace impurities. And it looks like we are. The silane's getting cleaner as it goes through the plant. We always thought that would happen, but until you've actually done it, you don't know. It looks like that's happening. So yeah, commissioning is going well. Listen, knock on wood, we'll start commercial production soon. But yeah, as always with commissioning, it takes as long as it takes, and hopefully we'll start soon.
Thanks, Paul. Can you provide an update on the ytterbium plant commissioning?
Yeah, so ytterbium's also going well. Again, they have their fair share of problems, but they're kind of solving through them. So I guess, you know, one problem was that we have a time of flight mass spectrometer on the production vessel that allows us to see in real time what the enrichment level is. That wasn't working. It was faulty. Again, an OEM supplier problem. It came from a manufacturer in Cambridge, UK. They flew out, they mended it, got it working again. We had a problem with the vacuum pump that provides vacuum. Again, get the OEM provider out, get it mended, it's going again. So they're going really well. They've done multiple runs now. They're taking natural ytterbium from 12% and enriching it to 80% in a single step. Again, knock on wood, they'll start producing commercial product very soon. I mean, they're almost there. I think they're seeing some great results. So yeah.
When will you start processing carbon-14? Has the feedstock arrived yet?
Yeah, so the feedstock arrived today, which is great. So we'd expect to start processing carbon-14, you know, pretty soon. So yeah, it's been painful, that carbon-14 delay. I mean, it set us back 6 months. You know, it was supposed to arrive in sort of first half last year, so more like 9 months actually. And there were some problems getting it out of Tennessee. Anyway, it's here now, so it's great. It's good.
Lots of people are writing about South Africa. They want to know about the South Africa land seizure developments and how that may affect the business, as well as President Trump's response to those developments in South Africa.
Yeah, so I mean, what you see in the newspapers, we're not seeing over here. You know, we feel very comfortable where we are, and so yeah, I mean, we haven't seen or experienced any of that or witnessed it. You know, I can't comment more than that. We found the South African government very, very responsive, very helpful. we've had nothing but support from them. And I guess, listen, we do a lot in the country. We employ 150 people now, and we pay much higher than average wages. And, I think we have a good relationship with them. But I've seen everything you see in the press in general, we have not witnessed here. And I think actually, in general, in Africa as a continent, there's a lot of articles and, press about negative on Africa as a continent. I'm actually very bullish Africa as a continent. What I see is a really young population wanting to work, really well educated, speak perfect English, work really hard. I think Africa's got a huge amount of opportunities over the next 20 years. And again, I see a very different thing on the ground here to what I read in the newspapers overseas.
What, if any, discussions has the firm had with the new Trump administration in the United States about getting HALEU production on U.S. soil?
So we've had no discussions with the Trump administration, but we've obviously had discussions with the DOE, the NRC, and other regulatory authorities in the United States. We've also had discussions with the UK government as well. Governments don't often move as fast as private companies do. I would say discussions with most regulators have been frustrating in terms of the speed and their appetite to want to do something quickly. You can't push on a piece of string. We're going full speed ahead in South Africa. If we can build a second plant in the UK and the US, that's fantastic. We'd expect to do it at some point. But I mean, it's these things can take some time. I actually had an interesting call with the DOE and the NRC back in December. I mean, there were 21 people on the call. 21. I think 2 of them spoke. There were 19 spectators. I mean, just incredible. We had a meeting in London 2 weeks ago with DESNZ, the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero, and I mean, it was just depressing how incompetent these people are. But listen, we can't do much about that, I'm afraid.
What is the earliest that HALEU might be produced? What are the expected quantities, and how many metric tons can a single facility scale up to?
So I think we've said we're aiming and hoping to start producing HALEU in 2027. That's a hell of a stretch objective. There is no way we would ever do that anywhere else in the world. We're running as fast as we can. I think we had a group of investors here in South Africa a few weeks ago with Nexa, and Nexa described it as we're moving lightning fast, and we'll see what we can do. We'll see what we can do. I can't make any guarantees. It comes down to licenses, regulators, and that kind of stuff. We built our ytterbium plant in 8 months. 6 months was procurement, 2 months was construction, and so we can build plants quickly. The question really comes down to whether or not we can get them licensed and permitted in a quick, timely fashion. And in terms of capacities, I don't think we've disclosed the capacity that the first plant will be. It'll be basically for TerraPower's immediate needs. I don't think they've disclosed that. And we haven't disclosed how much each individual plant can produce either.
Please give us an overview of the site visit that recently took place. And will there be additional site visits in 2025?
Yeah, so we held a site visit for about 27 investors, mainly from the US, in about 3 weeks ago. We showed them, we had a morning of introduction to all of our scientists, our engineers. And then we did a very extensive site tour of our facilities. We went to the carbon-14 plant, actually started off in the R&D labs, then up to the ytterbium laser facility, then over to our carbon-14 plant, then over to Kudersport, which is where the multi-isotope plant is and silicon-28 is. And that was day 1. And then day 2, we started off over at Pelindaba with Nexa. So it's about a 2.5 meeting with Nexa, the Sengupile, who is the head of energy and industry, and then Ayanda, who is the head of nuclear operations. Then we moved down to Pet Labs to visit our radio pharmacy, and then we had a dinner with Nexa in the evening. So it's a good day, lots of questions. I think our view has always been give investors as much opportunity to ask whatever questions they want and see everything, and hopefully they got quite a lot out of it.
What isotope do you expect to produce in Iceland later this year, and why?
So we were planning on using zinc as our first isotope in Iceland. we may change that actually and do xenon as our first isotope in Iceland. The main reason for that was, zinc, we expected quantum enrichment really to be more of a 2026 event rather than a 2025 event. And zinc is an isotope that can be done using either quantum enrichment or ASP. There's a gaseous form of zinc, and there's also a solid version of zinc. And given the results we're seeing right now on in quantum, we kind of think quantum may be a better way of doing it. Our return on capital on quantum is significantly higher than return on capital on an ASP plant. The capital needs are much lower, and so we'll see. We'll see how we'll see what the first plant in Iceland is. I was in Iceland just last week with the government. We visited the site where we're going to build the plants, met with the landlord, met with the energy company, met with the government. So they seem very excited about us going there. So yeah, things are going well there.
Analyst estimates are for $30 million in revenue for 2025. Are you comfortable with this number? And what do you think the Q4 run rate will be?
So we haven't given any revenue guidance for the year, so I can't really comment on the analyst's number. But I think if you add up the capacities of the plants and the contracts we have and that kind of stuff, you'll pretty easily be able to do the math and work out what our annualized kind of revenues should be based on those capacities, revenues, and contracts.
Have you any plans to talk with nuclear powers in Ontario, Canada, who have ambitious plans to become a nuclear hub?
Most of our discussions with nuclear companies are under NDA. I'm not allowed to disclose who we talk to. But clearly we have a good relationship with the Canadian government and the Ontario administration, because that's where our carbon-14 is coming from. And I probably can't say much more than that, but obviously we're happy to serve anyone in the industry who needs who needs product, who needs fuel, and needs our services.
Scientists from the UK Atomic Energy Authority announced in mid-January the creation of a diamond battery that leverages the decaying power of isotope carbon-14 and can run for 5,700 years. Articles say it uses a manufactured diamond to safely encase small amounts of carbon-14. As the electrons pass through the diamond, which is a semiconductor material, it creates electricity and power can be used in medical devices, power generation, and space-based technology for thousands of years. How would ASPI benefit from this technology and being able to provide the carbon-14 isotope for this diamond battery?
Yeah, I think that's actually really interesting technology. We've certainly looked at it. One of our board members, Professor Mike Gawley, is actually the director of nuclear fusion at the UK Atomic Energy Authority. And he has a very close relationship with the team that did that work. So we think it's pretty interesting. One of the problems of carbon-14 has been the availability of carbon-14. We could essentially produce as much carbon-14 as the world ever needs. We can expand our plant if we had to. We have a great way of doing it. So listen, I think it's really exciting, really interesting, but early days. Let's see where it goes over the next several years.
In your presentation, you say you aim to be break-even this year. What annualized revenue would require?
Well, we haven't given any estimates or guidance. So, but I think if you look at our cash SG&A each year, you'll see if you take out one-time items, we're probably running at around that $15 million level for cash SG&A. Maybe that goes up a little bit this year to perhaps sort of 16, 17, that kind of number. And so, if we can generate enough revenues with a gross margin of say 80% and clear that $15 million SG&A line, that gets us to cash flow break even, and that's just basic math.
Is there any information currently available or pending on the size of the silicon 28 plant production estimates in kilograms for the Icelandic cluster?
So we haven't announced how big a silicon plant would be in the Icelandic cluster. We've said our plant in South Africa is 50 kilos, and I realized I forgot to answer earlier why we increased from 10 to 50, and we realized that we'd have more than 10 kilos of demand, and therefore we'd add a bit of extra capex into it and increase it. So by adding a few extra stages, we could go from 10 to 50. It'd be multiple times the size of our current facility. The goal would be to be producing hundreds of kilograms, maybe even more than that, at very low costs to enable silicon-28 to go into many different end markets. Our current pricing for silicon-28 is sort of $500 a gram, and that probably doesn't enable it to go into many end markets or many end users. If we can bring that price down to say $20 to $40 a gram, suddenly it can go into many different applications, and that would really drive the demand for it. And so our goal is to build a really big plant that can produce it very cheaply. But listen, let's crawl, walk, run. Let's get our first plant going. Let's get the market established and then see where it goes from there.
There was a filing today that BlackRock now owns 5.5% of ASPI. Did they participate in the last financing round, or was this mostly open market buys?
Yeah, I can't really talk about discussions and transactions we have with investors. I'm afraid that's it's confidential. It's not fair for me to disclose those kind of stuff. So I'll avoid answering that question.
What competitive advantage does ASPI have over existing isotope suppliers like Russia's Rosatom or China's state-run facilities?
I think we have a couple of advantages. So in the ASP technology, our plants are much cheaper to build, much quicker to build. They're simpler. And we can enrich light isotopes as well as heavy isotopes. So you're not going to be able to enrich silicon-28 in the form of silane in a centrifuge. It's not going to work. You have to have a mass over 100, because we actually prefer lighter gases. So that's a key advantage of ASP. We have some disadvantages too. We use a bit more energy than a centrifuge uses. One of the reasons why we're going to Iceland is to get cheaper energy. And then for quantum, that's a really unique method in terms of the technology there, the lasers we use, the way we make, the bandwidths we use, and the way we find forbidden transitions between quantum states allows us to have an extraordinarily high level of enrichment factor, and that's not seen by any other enrichment process. I think they're the two main advantages.
Do you have any response to the charges leveled against ASPI, old technology, etc.?
No, we put out a written response and a public response, with our thoughts on that, and I'll let people read that. That's probably the best way to discuss that.
Can you comment on the capital requirements of the company as you build out for these 3 different markets over the next 3 years?
Yeah, so we've got a lot of cash on our balance sheet right now. We've actually never been so well capitalized. So if you'd asked me what keeps me awake at night a year and a half ago, it was our balance sheet. That's no longer keeping me awake at night. So we've got a lot of cash. We intend to deploy that into high return projects, and we focus very much on the return on capital and IRR of a project. So the quantum enrichment laser processes get the highest IRR, and our plan is to build quite a few more of those in South Africa. We actually already started the procurement for those. So for isotopes like gadolinium 160, zinc 68, nickel 64, there's a lot of demand for lithium 7 and lithium 6, and they'll go under the QLE part of the business. But so we'll spend money there, and we expect to put some debt into that business. And then the ASP plants in Iceland, we'd expect the customer to finance a large portion of that and then get a lot of debt. So that won't use as much of our balance sheet for those facilities, but they're more expensive. And then for uranium, again, these uranium plants, the initial plants aren't expensive, so we'd expect to build some of those. So I would say a QLE plant is for medical isotopes between sort of less than $5 million. An ASP plant's more like 30, and a quantum plant for uranium is more like 10, those kind of ballpark numbers. And so we have plenty of cash to build those plants over the next 12, 24 months.
Does ASP Isotopes have any patents on its technology? If not, then how do you expect to maintain your competitive advantage?
So we don't have any patents on our entire process, but we are in the process of filing patents for certain parts of our process. So for example, we invented the compressors that go into our multi-isotope plant. Excuse me. We invented a particular type of valve called the PAR valve that we use to control the pressures and the flow rates inside our multi-isotope plant. We've also invented the molar mass meters that tell us what the molar mass is inside the plant and allow us to control the plant. So we think they're all kind of patentable. Inside the quantum plant, there's also highly technical things that we've invented, and we think they're patentable. We will never patent the entire process per se. We probably wouldn't be allowed to patent the entire process. By patenting the process, we're telling the world how to enrich isotopes. That's exactly what the IAEA do not want us to do. So all of our plants and our research facilities come under what we call comprehensive safeguard agreements with the IAEA. That means they can inspect with just a 2-hour warning. They come to inspect our plants twice a year. It means the security controls around our plants are extremely tight. There are no phone lines or internet lines into or out of our plants. At the end of the day, every hard disk is put inside a safe, inside a second safe, inside a metal room. There's metal bars around our facility to stop cars crashing through the walls. Every bag and every car is searched on the way in and on the way out. Only 9 people have access to the technology and are allowed in the plant. I'm actually not allowed in the research center by myself. Be accompanied by one of the 9 people who've got permission from the Non-Proliferation Council of South Africa to have access to technology. So it's highly guarded, highly controlled who has access to it. It's not allowed to be transferred to someone who is not a South African. So that would create a big international, incident if that happens. So it's very tightly controlled who has access to it, and that's how we maintain control of the trade secrets that we have.
With the Trump administration proposing new incentives to encourage bringing in domestic manufacturing, including in the pharmaceutical sector, has ASP applied for permits to build isotope production facilities in the United States? If so, what challenges or opportunities do you foresee in bringing your enrichment technologies stateside?
So we have not applied for permits yet. We've had multiple discussions with multiple regulators and licensors in the United States about bringing our technology to the United States. We think the USA is exactly where this technology should go. We would love to build a really big silicon-28 plant in the United States to service some of these new fabs that are being built in places like Arizona. We think the US has the greatest demand for medical isotopes. There's no domestic supply today. Let's build this in the United States. We're really keen to come to the USA. It's one step at a time. These things take time. As I always say to my team, let's crawl, walk, run, and we're kind of doing it one step at a time. But yeah, we'd like to come to the USA. It'll just take some time. And actually, discussing with US customers, most US customers seem agnostic as to where they buy isotopes from, so long as it is from a friendly country. And so many view Iceland as being a friendly country. Many view South Africa as being a friendly country. We haven't had any pushback or problems with customers from supplying from either of those 2 regions.
Early in the presentation, you said it was the intention to spin out QLE. In the past, you said the company would be given to shareholders. Has this comment changed, and if so, why?
No, the comment hasn't changed. The intention hasn't changed. The intention has always been and still is to spin out QLE. So the ASPI shareholders will receive some shares of QLE, and it'll be listed as a separate entity.
Can you comment on the Terra Power opportunity and whether you're close to an agreement as opposed to an LOI?
Agreements take quite a long time definitive agreements take quite a long time to write. Most of our definitive agreements took about a year from initial discussions with the customer to the final agreement. And the price and volume is agreed upon really in the first week or 2. And then you go through the rest of the agreement. I can't really comment on where we are, other than that we've given Terra Power a period of exclusivity, which allows them and us to negotiate these contracts and get them over the finish line. But as and when they're done, we'll announce them to the marketplace.
How do you power a plant to operate? How long would a kilo of isotopes provide power?
So can you say that question again, please? I didn't quite hear it.
Yeah, let me find it again. Stand by, please. How do you power a plant to operate, and how long would a kilo of isotope provide power for?
Right, so we power our plants by taking energy from the grid. So our ASP plant has power from the grid. It also has diesel generators and an uninterrupted power supply. We have 1.8 megawatts of diesel generators sitting outside our multi-isotope plant for when South Africa goes through load shedding. Our QLE plants and our carbon plant actually sit in an area where there is no load shedding, so that doesn't need the backup energy. And we wouldn't expect our isotopes to power our plants. It comes from the grid. So I think I've answered that question.
Thank you, everyone, for all of these questions. There are much too many to answer today. We do invite you, however, to use ASPI@redship.com if you would like to submit the questions, whether it was answered or not, and I will make sure that Paul Mann sees them. Going to take a few more before we wrap up here, Paul. ASPI's isotope enrichment process is quite novel compared to traditional methods. How have scientists and industry experts reacted when they learned about your approach? Have you seen interest from academic or government research institutions in collaborating on further advancements?
Yeah, so we've received a lot of enthusiasm from both companies, customers, and governments. You know, this industry hasn't had much research done in it over the last 30, 40 years. You've been in a pretty bad bear market for isotopes, really driven by the megatons to megawatts program, where Russia and US basically down-blended weapons-grade uranium into nuclear fuel and gave it away for free. So it's pretty difficult to compete against that backdrop. So it's been a tough era for the industry, and not much research has been done. There's suddenly an emerging demand for new types of isotopes, which have never really been needed before for nuclear medicine, quantum computing, and new types of nuclear fuel. So there's a lot of enthusiasm and interest in what we do, and we've received a lot of support from both customers and governments.
And final question, is there an update on the timeline for the QLE listing?
There isn't really, no. I mean, we've always said there's two conditions need to be set before we spin out QLE. The first of those is that we have to have a location identified where we're going to build our first HALEU facility. We have that now. It's Pelindaba. We're working with Nexa to get the agreements in place for us to go to Pelindaba to build that facility. And the second is that we have to have a clear line of sight to ASPI, the main business being generating free cash flow. We think that's happening during the next sort of 6 months or so. So the two conditions that need to be met for a QLE spin are kind of almost there. Obviously, from our standpoint, we have to file, I think it's an S1 with the SEC that has to go through a review period. So there's certain things that are out of our control in terms of the timing, but feels like we're almost there now, ready to go.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. We invite you, anyone who has submitted a question and we haven't been able to address it, to copy it and paste it into an email and send it to ASPI@redship.com. I know for a fact that Paul reads everything we forward to him. Please visit the information page created by RedShip for ASP Isotopes. It's ASPIinfo.com. There you can view and download the investor presentation and fact sheet and sign up for news alerts on ASP Isotopes. And now I'm pleased to announce that we have an AI feature, which is on every company's landing page, including that of ASPI. You can find out a lot about ASPI by using Red Chat. We just launched Red Chat. It is our advanced AI assistant designed to empower investors with instant, in-depth insights on more than 2,000 small cap and micro cap stocks, including, of course, ASP Isotopes. Try it now. You can try it on ASPIinfo.com, of course, and you can also just go straight to red.chat. Watch Small Stocks, Big Money, RedShip's program featuring exciting small cap companies, including occasionally ASPI, every Saturday night at 7 p.m. Eastern on Bloomberg USA. Join RedShip's next webinar. That'll be with Kalidi Biotherapeutics tomorrow at 4:15 p.m. U.S. Eastern. Register for all RedShip webinars at redship.com/events, where you can also view an archived version of today's ASPI webinar. Thanks again to our many participants today. And as always, thank you, Paul.
Thank you for your interest.